Hi, everybody. I am Dr. Sarah Wooten, and I am here with All About Cats to bring you an informational video that might save your cat's life. This video is all about heavy breathing in cats, and this topic is so important. I actually have notes. So if you see me look down, I'm referring to my notes because I want to make sure that you have all the information you need in case this ever is your scenario. So there's many things that can cause heavy breathing in cats. Some of them, like breathing heavily after vigorous play, not a big deal. Other causes for heavy breathing, such as heart failure or feline asthma, those can be life-threatening. So in this video, you're going to learn about the different types of heavy breathing, how to recognize heavy breathing and tell the difference between the different types, the causes of heavy breathing, including the most common ones and the more rare ones. We're going to talk about all the symptoms, and then lastly, what you should do if you notice that your cat is having a hard time breathing. So before we talk about abnormal breathing in cats, it's important for you to know what normal breathing looks like in cats. So cats naturally breathe faster than humans. Humans take anywhere between 12 to 16 breaths per minute at rest. Cats who are resting or sleeping, they take anywhere between 15 to 30. So when a cat is breathing normally, their chest movements should be pretty small, not very big, and their breath sound should be very quiet, almost like a whisper. So to count the number of breaths that your cat is taking per minute, you're going to want to count their breaths when they are sleeping. And you're going to want to count an inhalation and an expiration as one breath. So when the chest goes up and down, that equals 1. So count the number of breaths for 30 seconds, multiply it by 2, and then that will give you the number of breaths per minute. And that, my friends, is your cat's resting respiratory rate. If your cat's resting respiratory rate, try and say that 10 times fast, right? Resting respiratory rate. If it's higher than 30, but your cat is otherwise healthy and happy, then there's probably not an immediate cause for concern. However, it may behoove you to schedule a consult with your local veterinarian to just discuss, hey, I was counting my cat's resting breath rate the other day, and I noticed this. Doctor, what do you think? A, you may catch something early, which is always great. And B, you are really going to impress your doctor. Yeah, good job, you. If your cat's resting respiratory rate is higher than 40, then it's time to call your vet and get your cat seen. So now that you know what normal breathing looks like in a resting cat, let's talk about abnormal breathing patterns. Yes, including, you guessed it, heavy breathing. The first type of heavy breathing that I want to talk about is something called dyspnea, because this type of breathing is usually the most life-threatening and requires immediate veterinary attention. Dyspnea is the official fancy doctor word that veterinarians use to describe difficulty breathing, respiratory distress. And here's some etymology. It comes from the Greek, from dus, which means difficult, and nuoe, which means breath, right? Dyspnea is in itself not a diagnosis, right? But it's a symptom that appears as a result of some sort of underlying problem, right? Vets may also use the word dyspneic to describe how your cat is breathing. The second type of heavy breathing I want to talk about is something called tachypnea. Tachypnea, which is the, again, official medical term for rapid breathing, usually with a closed mouth. So dyspnea, on the other hand, often has open mouth breathing, or it can have closed mouth breathing. But tachypnea typically has closed mouth rapid breathing. Tachypnea comes from the English word tachy, which means swift, like tachycardia, which means a swift heart rate. And again, as you already know, nuoe from the Greek, which means breath. Cats are tachypnic because they're trying to get more oxygen into their body, and it occurs naturally when a cat is exercising vigorously, We've all seen those lions on TV after they bring down a hunt, right? They're breathing very, very rapidly. But if a cat is tachypnic while they're at rest, when they're resting, and that means that their breath rate is above 40, then there's probably something else going on. And you got to get a pair of veterinarian eyes on that cat. So the third type of heavy breathing I want to talk about is panting. Panting is like tachypnea in that the cat is breathing very quickly, but it is with an open mouth, kind of like a dog, right? So panting is generally not considered normal in cats, and it's usually indicative of something else, either stress. Stress is a big one, right? That's a big one. Pain, or an excessively high body temperature. Some medications, like opioids, like fentanyl and morphine, can cause panting in cats. That is the third type of heavy breathing. So we've got dyspnea, difficulty breathing, tachypnea, rapid breathing, and panting, right? So if you are seeing your cat engage in these type of breathing, then you gotta talk to your vet. So let's talk about the signs of difficulty breathing, dyspnea, heavy breathing, because again, knowing what these look like could potentially save your cat's life, right? So the first one, rapid breathing, all right, which you know is more than 30 to 40 breaths per minute. That's one symptom. Second symptom, very classical symptom with cats that are having difficulty catching their breath, is they maintain a specific posture. So a relaxed cat will lay on their side, maybe they'll roll over, they'll curl up, they'll groom. A cat that is dyspneic, having difficulty breathing, will typically, they won't even walk around really. They will sit like the Sphinx from Egypt, propped up on their elbows. And they often have their head and neck extended out because they're trying to make space in their airway to breathe. And they often have their eyes closed and they do not really respond very well because they are focused all of their energy on getting that next breath. It's really a terrible feeling. They may also be purring, which can be confusing and paradoxical to owners. But remember, if you've been following me for a while, that not all happy cats, not all purring cats, I should say, are happy cats. And purring cats, they will often purr because they're in stress or pain or even close to death. It's crazy, right? Don't let purring trip you up. And notice that the posture, it's a very typical posture. They're on their elbows and they often have their head and neck out and their eyes are closed. Another sign is big movements of their chest or their belly when they're breathing, bigger than normal, right? So normally their chest doesn't move very much and their belly moves even less. If you're noticing big movements, that cat is really, really trying to breathe. Another sign is coughing. Coughing is a sign of respiratory distress in cats. It's often less common that they will show signs of coughing, and coughing usually is associated with things like asthma or bronchitis. Pale or blue gums, definite sign that those kids are not getting enough oxygen. Sometimes it can cause them actually to foam at the mouth. So in my holiday safety tips, we talked about electrocution from chewing on electrical cords. And the one thing that electrocution does, not only does it burn gums, it can cause fluid to rush into the lungs and around the lungs and cause a lot of problems with fluid in the chest. And that can often result in foaming, right? So that's not a good sign if you see that. Another symptom is noisier than normal breath sounds. So here's where you're going to get all the knowledge here, right? I'm giving you all my secrets. So partial obstruction of the upper airway, and we're talking like here up, nostrils, back of the sinuses here and back to the back of the throat. So if there's any obstruction from here to here, you will get signs that sound like nasal congestion or snoring or snorting. That is called stertor, S-T-E-R-T-O-R, stertor. And it, right? Typical sound, sign of difficulty breathing. Harsh, high-pitched wheezing caused by obstructions in the windpipe is called stridor. And it usually is heard when a cat is breathing in. And that's caused by the air that's rushing by a partial obstruction. Then there's wheezing, which is often a continuous high-pitched whistling sound. That is heard when a cat is breathing out when they're struggling with something like asthma. And that's caused by narrowed lower airways. So lowered large bronchus, large bronchi, bronchioles, things like that. And that is something that is typical in something like feline asthma. And those cats are really struggling when they expire, when they breathe out. So in general, cats that are having a hard time breathing in, they often have a problem with their upper airway. If they're having a hard time breathing out, it's a lower airway. Now, that's not every single time, but that's a good general rule. All right, so now you know that. If you see any of these signs, my friends, if you're seeing them right now, you turn this video off and you call your vet as soon as possible. Now, if possible, right? The thing is cats that are having difficulty breathing are very fragile. They just don't do very well with it. And they can often collapse if they are not treated or seen immediately. So get thee to a vet. The best way to transport a dyspneic cat, a cat that's having difficulty breathing, is in a crate covered with a light blanket, something that they can breathe through, but just blocks their vision. And the whole reason for this is you want to minimize stress. If you have asthma, you know that stress makes it worse. And if you have difficulty breathing, you know that stress makes it worse. So you want that cat as calm as possible and feeling at ease on their way to the vet. One more note, cats that are having a hard time breathing will often hide more and eat less. Whenever a cat feels sick for any reason, they tend to instinctually engage in these behaviors. So those could be some other signs that you see with a cat that's having a hard time breathing. So now that we've talked about the symptoms and you are an expert on all things difficulty, heavy breathing in cats, let's talk about the causes. So there's 4 main causes that are the most common reasons why a cat has difficulty breathing. So I'm going to give you those first because 9 times out of 10, it's one of these 4, okay? Number 1, upper respiratory infections. Upper respiratory infections cause swelling in the nasal passages. They cause snot. They cause nasal discharge. They cause a fever. And they can cause that sign we talked about called stridor, remember? You know, that thing. So that is a very common cause of why cats can have difficulty breathing due to upper respiratory infections. Number 2, feline asthma and feline bronchitis, which causes constriction of the airways and wheezing and whistling sounds and generally makes cats miserable. This often has an allergic component to it, and they can have asthma attacks just like people. So that's the number 2 cause. Number 3 cause that I see is heart disease or heart failure. And that causes difficulty breathing by causing fluid buildup in the lungs. Number 4, the fourth most common is what I call pleural effusion, which is fluid buildup around the lungs, which makes it difficult for a cat to inflate their lungs. So those are the 4 most common reasons. There's more, so here's some more causes why your cat could be having a hard time breathing. Foreign body, something stuck in the airway that shouldn't be there, such as a piece of grass that's stuck in a nostril or something caught the windpipe. Chest trauma from being hit by a car or bit by a dog. It can result in a condition called tension pneumothorax, which is usually that super dramatic chest wound in movies where they're like, get me something to release the pressure. And then they stick something right there and then they let all the air out. Yeah, well, that's the same thing happens in cats. So another common thing is pneumonia. Pneumonia can cause cats to have problems breathing, collapsed lungs, lung tumors. Tumors can wreak havoc in cats' chests. Allergic reactions. Cats can have allergic or anaphylactic reactions that can cause them to have difficulty breathing. And then lastly, heartworm disease. Oh yes, my friends, cats get heartworms just like dogs. Now, cats are not the normal host for heartworms, but heartworms can make their home in a cat just as easily as they do in a dog. And a heartworm in a cat is actually a more significant problem than a heartworm in most dogs because their hearts are so tiny and so they don't have a lot of space. So heartworm disease can also cause problems. Then there's the smush face cats, your brachycephalic cats, like your Persians. Those can have a problem from birth. They can have birth defects where their nostrils or their airways are too narrowed, and that can cause a lifetime of difficulty breathing. So if you notice that I haven't added obesity to this list of causes, and in itself, being overweight or obese is not a cause of respiratory difficulty, but what I do notice is that if a cat has any of these other conditions, being overweight makes it worse. There are also other conditions that aren't primary lung, heart, or airway problems, such as anemia, which is a low red blood cell count, or blood loss. And that can cause a cat to breathe very quickly because they're not getting enough oxygen because they don't have enough red blood cells. Then there can also be significant complications from things like kidney disease or thyroid disorders or severe diabetic problems, ketoacidosis. I know I'm using a bunch of big words. The bottom line is that things in other parts of the body can affect the respiratory rate. So it may, if your cat's having problems or abnormal or heavy breathing, it may not be a primary lung problem, right? Again, time to talk to your vet. In order to be able to help a cat that is having difficulty breathing, you have to know what is causing the problem, right? Because treatment of pneumonia is very different than removing a piece of grass from the nose, is very different than treating anemia. Very different, right? So treatment of difficulty breathing is aimed at two things. One, making sure that the cat's getting enough oxygen, and then two, resolving the underlying condition. In order to resolve the underlying condition, your vet has to know what it is. So it's likely if you take your cat to the vet, they're going to want to run some tests. That's okay, right? So your veterinarian will take an oral history from you, and this is where you're going to impress them with all this knowledge that you gained from me. And then they're going to conduct a full physical exam. And then they're going to recommend probably some lab work and some imaging studies such as X-ray based on what they see on the physical exam. All right. Pretty typical standard of operations on how it's dealt with in the veterinary hospital. So how do you help a cat that's struggling to breathe? Well, unless the problem is like right here at the nose, oftentimes there's not much you can do without the aid of a veterinarian, right? Because they have the tools and you need the tools. So tools help, and I'm thinking about things like medications, right? Or things like that. So treatment of heavy breathing, as we talked about, helping the cat breathe more easily and then resolving the underlying issue. Treatments can include medications like antibiotics or bronchodilators or steroids or medications for heart disease or other medications, right? Depending on what the problem is. If the breathing's really severe and your cat cannot get enough oxygen in their body, then your cat may need to get some oxygen therapy. Now, we don't tend to put the little thing on their face like you see people do. You don't have a little tank going around after the cat. We have oxygen cages that we put them in, and it's an oxygen-rich environment, and they can sit there and rest. So sometimes oxygen therapy is warranted. If your cat has fluid in their chest, they might need a chest tap to remove the fluid. If they have a tumor, they might need surgery, right? If there's heartworm disease, they might need to be treated for that. And so on and so forth. So treatment is very individualized and depends on what is causing the heavy breathing. If your cat is having heavy breathing due to a common upper respiratory cold, right? We call them colds or respiratory viral infections. There are things you can do at home for that cat. In addition to any kind of medications that your veterinarian prescribes, you can do steam therapy. Oh, I love steam therapy. And that helps loosens those secretions that are gunking up your cat's nasal passages. Easiest way to do that, turn that shower on all the way to hot and steam up the bathroom and put your cat in there for 15 minutes twice a day. That will help everything loosen up and drain out. If your cat has something like asthma, then you're going to need to do some environmental modification to reduce allergens in your home. HEPA filters, vacuuming, covers, things like that, right? You're going to want to keep that allergen load down. So there are some things you can do at home, but again, all of this needs to be done in conjunction with a veterinarian so that you can get drilled down on what the cause of the heavy breathing is and get the absolute accurate treatment and prognosis for you. So in summary, my friends, I have said a lot to you. If you're still with me, God bless you. Good job. But in summary, there are three types of heavy breathing in most cats. Dyspnea, which is difficulty breathing. Tachypnea, which is breathing rapidly with a closed mouth. And panting. Number 2, breathing abnormalities are caused by many different things. Some of them can be very mild. Some of them can be life-threatening. Number 3, treatment for heavy breathing is aimed at helping the cat breathe better, get more oxygen in their body, and resolve the underlying problem if possible. 4, heavy breathing in cats is not necessarily a death sentence. Cats that have abnormalities with breathing can get treatment and they can live long, healthy, happy lives if they receive the right kind of care. So if you see the symptoms of heavy breathing in your cat, call your vet as soon as you can and get that cat looked at. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for investing this time in your cat's health. Thank you for everything you do to make this world beautiful and bright. I love doing these videos for you, and I would love to know if it's helpful. So leave me feedback in the comments section. Let me know if there's any topics you would like covered, and please join me again soon for another video on from All About Cats on how to help your cat live healthy, happy, and long lives.